The envelope was already on the table when I walked into the kitchen. Thick, cream, colored, official. My name printed neatly across the front in a font that felt colder than it should have. I knew what it was before I touched it, the same way you know when a silence has gone on too long. My husband didn't look up from his phone. He sat there in his pressed shirt, coffee untouched, posture relaxed, as if this morning were no different from any other. As if our marriage wasn't about to be folded into legal language and filed away. Just read it, he said, finally glancing at me. It's straightforward, straightforward. That word landed harder than the envelope itself. I slid into the chair across from him and opened it slowly, my fingers trembling despite my effort to stay calm. Pages spilled out neatly clipped, already signed on his end, divorce papers, terms highlighted, assets listed. My name reduced to a line item. You should sign soon, he added casually. Dragging this out will only cost you money. I looked up. Cost us money. He smiled, not kindly, not cruelly, just certain. You can't afford a real lawyer anyway. There it was. The sentence he had rehearsed. The one he believed would end the conversation. My chest tightened, memories rushing in faster than I could stop them. The job I quit when his promotion required a move. The nights I stayed up balancing accounts while he slept. The years I spent building a home so he could build a reputation. All of it quietly erased by a single sentence. I stared back down at the papers. He mistook my silence for defeat. These terms are generous, he continued. Given everything, as if love, labor, and loyalty could be summarized in bullet points. I scanned the pages more closely now, the house his, retirement accounts his. The small savings account I managed for emergencies split, but only after expenses. Even my car was listed as a shared asset, though it was bought with money from my inheritance. He had planned this. Carefully, thoroughly, long before I ever suspected the distance between us had turned into something permanent. You okay? He asked, impatience creeping into his voice. This doesn't have to be emotional. I almost laughed at that. Instead, I folded the papers neatly and placed them back on the table. My hands were steady now, too steady. I need time, I said. He scoffed. For what? There's nothing to negotiate. I met his eyes then, really looked at him. The man I had defended to friends, the man I had trusted with my future. In that moment, I saw not a husband, but a stranger who believed my worth depended entirely on his generosity. I won't sign today, I said quietly. His jaw tightened. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Harder for who? I wondered. I stood up, carrying the papers with me. As I walked down the hallway, my legs felt heavy, but my mind was racing. Every dismissed opinion, every time he told me not to worry about money, every time he said, I'll handle it. In the bedroom, I sat on the edge of the bed and spread the papers out again. The language was sharp, precise, final. This wasn't just a divorce. It was a calculated erasure. For a moment the tears came, quiet ones, not for him, but for the woman I used to be, the one who believed sacrifice guaranteed security. Then something shifted. I remembered a name, a number I hadn't dialed in years, a past version of myself he had forgotten ever existed. I wiped my face, picked up my phone, and stared at the screen. He thought I couldn't afford a real lawyer. I was about to prove him wrong. The house was quiet in the way it only gets after midnight, when even the walls seem to listen. I sat at the dining table with the divorce papers spread in front of me, a cold cup of tea untouched at my side. I read every line again, slower this time, not as a wife hoping for fairness, but as someone studying a contract designed to corner her. That's when I noticed it. The numbers didn't quite add up. Accounts were missing. Transfers referenced but never explained. A retirement fund I remembered helping him open wasn't listed at all. My heart pounded not with fear, but with recognition. He hadn't just underestimated my financial situation. He had underestimated me. I picked up my phone, thumb hovering over the screen. For years, I had let him believe I was disconnected from the world I used to know. That the version of me who understood fine print and strategy had disappeared the moment I chose family over career. He was wrong. I scrolled until I found the name, Maya Patel. We hadn't spoken in years, but I still remembered sitting beside her in cramped classrooms, arguing case studies, dreaming about futures that felt impossibly big back then. She had become everything I'd stepped away from, a sharp legal mind, relentless, respected. I hesitated only a second before pressing call. She answered on the third ring. "Hello, Maya," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "It's me." There was a pause. Then a soft intake of breath. "I was wondering when you'd call." That was all it took. The dam broke. Not in tears, but in words. I explained everything. The papers, the insult, the quiet certainty with which he believed the outcome was already decided. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she exhaled slowly. "You didn't lose your intelligence when you chose your marriage," she said. "You just stopped being seen." Something warm spread through my chest at that, validation I hadn't realized I was starving for. "Send me everything," she continued, "every document, every email, every account statement you've ever touched. I don't have much," I admitted. "You have more than you think," she replied, "and more importantly, you have time." After we hung up, I opened old folders on my laptop. Years of digital clutter surfaced, scanned receipts, budget spreadsheets, email chains I'd archived without thought. I remembered nights I stayed up tracking expenses while he told me not to worry. I had worried anyway. By 2 a.m, patterns emerged, transfers between accounts, sudden withdrawals after bonuses. Assets moved under business names I recognized because I'd helped register them. I wasn't imagining it. He had been rearranging the board long before he invited me to play. The next day, Maya called back. "This isn't just a defense," she said. "It's leverage." I closed my eyes, letting the word settle. Leverage. Not desperation, not survival, power. She explained my options carefully. How marital contributions weren't limited to paychecks. How sacrifice had legal weight. How the story he was telling on paper could be rewritten, with facts. When I hung up, I felt different, not angry, focused. That evening, my husband noticed the shift. "You talk to anyone?" he asked, trying to sound casual. I smiled faintly. "Just organizing things." He nodded, satisfied. He still thought the ending belonged to him. Later, alone again, I saved every file to a secure drive and labeled a new folder with my name, not his. Mine. The call had done more than connect me to a lawyer. It reconnected me to myself, and this time I wasn't stepping away. The courthouse smelled of polished wood, stale coffee, and nerves. I walked in with a quiet determination that surprised even me. The divorce papers felt lighter in my hands, no longer a symbol of defeat but a blueprint for reclamation. I had rehearsed the day in my mind 1,000 times, yet nothing could prepare me for the power of reality. He was already there, leaning casually against the wall, suit immaculate, tie just so, smile confident. He spotted me and straightened, that same self-assured grin I had once trusted so blindly. He waved a hand toward the gallery as if to say, "Don't worry, this will be easy." The courtroom clerk called our case. We followed the bailiff inside. I noticed the way his expensive leather shoes echoed across the wooden floor, how every step seemed designed to intimidate. I let him think it worked. When the judge entered, everyone rose. My husband's smile was still there, but the tension around his eyes had deepened slightly. I could almost feel it, like a slow, invisible shift in the air. The proceedings began. My lawyer, Maya, spoke with calm authority. She laid out the contributions I had made over the years, meticulously citing financial records, receipts, email exchanges, and evidence of the hours I had dedicated to building his career while sacrificing my own. Every detail was precise, undeniable. He tried to interrupt once, sneering, "This is ridiculous. She's exaggerating." Maya didn't flinch. "Your Honor, these are facts, not exaggerations. These documents reflect years of labor, management, and oversight. The petitioner has every right to recognition and fair settlement." I watched him closely. The confidence I had seen in him since morning began to crack. little by little. His hands, once so steady, now fidgeted. His lawyer whispered urgently at his side. I caught the moment he realized the scope of evidence against him. Then came the most damning revelation. My research had uncovered financial maneuvers he thought I would never notice: hidden transfers, unreported bonuses, assets moved into accounts under corporate names he believed I couldn't trace. The documents went across the judge's desk, each one punctuating the room with undeniable truth. I saw it in his face, a fraction of fear, disbelief, and anger. He leaned back in his chair, suddenly smaller, less commanding. For the first time, he was not in control. The judge paused, flipping through the pages. These are serious discrepancies. I will need further review, but it appears the petitioner's claims are substantial. The words felt like sunlight through clouds. I had imagined the moment of victory countless times, but reality felt more profound, calm, clear, inevitable. Throughout the hearing, I remained quiet. No triumph in my tone, no gloating in my gaze. I let the evidence speak for me. The room itself seemed to recognize the balance of power had shifted. By the time the court adjourned, my husband's grin was gone. He left with stiff shoulders, mumbling excuses, while I walked out with my head high. I wasn't victorious in the way people expect. I wasn't waving flags or shouting, but I was victorious in the quietest, most satisfying way possible. Truth had spoken, and it had been heard. Outside, the sunlight hit my face, and I inhaled deeply. Freedom, I realized, wasn't about tearing someone down. It was about reclaiming yourself, your worth, your dignity, your life. As I slid into my car, I glanced at the papers one last time. They no longer represented betrayal. They represented power, and for the first time since this began, I understood something crucial. Sweet revenge doesn't scream. It moves quietly, methodically, until the one who underestimated you has no choice but to notice. I started the engine. The next phase of my life awaited, and for the first time I felt unshakable. Weeks passed after the courtroom hearing, but the world felt lighter. The tension that had clung to my shoulders like an invisible weight finally began to loosen. Each day, I woke with the quiet satisfaction of knowing that the power balance had shifted. My husband could no longer dictate my life with a flick of his arrogance, and that truth was sweeter than I had imagined. Maya had guided me every step of the way, but the victories weren't hers. They were mine. Every document submitted, every fact revealed, every question answered in court had been mine to provide. The recognition of my sacrifices, once dismissed, was now undeniable. I could finally breathe without guilt, without fear, without the constant, gnawing anxiety of being undervalued. The settlement was generous not because I demanded vengeance, but because justice is meticulous and facts are relentless. Assets were divided fairly. Retirement accounts and investments that had been manipulated to favor him were now equitably shared. The house, which I had kept immaculate and had once been a symbol of my sacrifice, was legally mine. Even the car I had driven for years was transferred into my name. Each line on the paperwork felt like a small triumph, a validation of years of overlooked labor and loyalty. But the real victory wasn't material, it was emotional. For the first time in years, I felt truly free. The quiet mornings no longer carried tension, the nights no longer carried fear. I wasn't rebuilding my life on his terms. I was doing it on mine. I didn't gloat when he learned of the outcome. I didn't need to. The subtle disbelief in his eyes, the way he hesitated when he realized he could no longer control the narrative, was enough. He had assumed I was weak, incapable of action, dependent on his wealth and connections. Now he understood that his assumptions were his undoing. I celebrated in ways he would never expect. I signed the house deeds with a sense of pride. I updated my career portfolio, reminding myself of the skills and intelligence I had put aside for family. I started reaching out to old colleagues, rebuilding the professional life I had once postponed. Each small step felt monumental because it wasn't just about recovery, it was about reclamation. And then came the moments that mattered most, the ones that no court could dictate, the quiet laughter with friends I had neglected, the long walks in the city, breathing in freedom with every step, the evenings spent planning a future that belonged solely to me. These moments were my revenge, the kind that doesn't shout, doesn't seek humiliation, doesn't need validation from anyone else. He once told me condescendingly, "You can't afford a real lawyer." I never answered. I never needed to. The reality was that I had more than a lawyer. I had knowledge, preparation, patience, and the resolve to see truth through to its conclusion. That was a power he could never buy, a lesson he could never unlearn. The sweetest revenge, I realized, isn't found in anger. It isn't in confrontation or scandal. It isn't in proving someone wrong in a way they can see and feel. It is found in living well, thriving, and standing tall in the life you build after betrayal. I looked around the home I now owned, my sanctuary, my triumph. The walls held no judgment, only the proof of my resilience. I smiled softly, thinking of him, thinking of the first insult, thinking of the papers that had once made me feel small. He had underestimated me, and that, I decided, was the best revenge of all.